Thank you, Meredad, and welcome everybody. It's a delight to be back in Toronto and in my home province. I have been in what I call God's country for about 20 years now, but I try to get back here about 6 or 7 or 8 times a year, any opportunity I get. And when Meredad asked me to moderate this panel, I jumped at the opportunity. So let me say it's always a delight to come back to Toronto. We have a very exciting group of speakers, and I'm actually, while I'm introducing our agenda today, I'm going to actually ask them to come up and take their seats at the tables here. So if we could get the 3 of you over there and the 3 of you over here, that would be great. So let me start out by just taking a little poll. How many of you are undergraduates? How many of you are graduate students? And of those, how many of you are PhD students? And how many of you plan to stay in academia? How many of you are faculty? And is there anyone here who isn't in academia or who isn't associated with the university? Private sector or public sector? How many private sector? And how many public sector? Okay, so we've got a majority of students, but very few of them going into academia, which will, I'm sure, be of interest to our panelists. So we asked our panelists to consider 3 questions. One is, what have been the challenges for them to make their way in their academic careers? 2 is, what is their analysis and their perspective on the status of women in science and technology in the academic field today? And 3, what are the recommendations that they might want to personally put forward in order to improve the numbers that you're going to hear about momentarily? So what I'd like to do is start by introducing to you our first speaker, who is well known to probably many of you, and certainly in the academic field in Canada is a very well-known individual. And after she has completed her presentation, I'll introduce the other 2, what we've called established scientists, to speak to you. And they each have 10 minutes to talk about the 3 questions that we've asked them to speak about. We will then be asking our younger generation scientists, who are on the far side of the room on my right, to respond to what they've heard from these panelists and bring their own perspective to the discussion in terms of their personal experiences or their perspective on women in science and technology in academia, or their recommendations for improvement. And then we're going to open it up to have the 2 panels have a conversation with each other. And lastly, we'll spend the last half hour opening it up to the floor so that we can talk to you about what you'd like to hear from these panelists. So I think we'll have a really engaging and interesting conversation today, and I hope that we will have lots of questions. If not, most of us will be around for a few minutes afterwards, so if we don't get to your question, I'd invite you to hang around for a few minutes, and I'm sure that you can have a chat with whichever one of the panelists you'd like to chat with. So let me start by introducing Lorna Marsden, who is in the center here. Lorna is President Emerita and Professor at York University. From 1997 to 2007, she served as President and Vice Chancellor of York University, and from 92 to 97, she was President and Vice Chancellor at Wilfrid Laurier University in Waterloo, my hometown. She did spend 20 years at U of T. I was asked to make sure I said that since we're on the grounds of U of T. In 1984, Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, as opposed to perhaps Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, named her to the Senate of Canada, where she served for 8.5 years before resigning to become the president of Wilfrid Laurier University. From 1975 to 1977, Lorna served as the president of the National Action Committee on the Status of Women, and in 2009, she became a member of the Order of Canada and the Order of Ontario. She is the co-author of a book called Lives of Their Own, which was published in 1990, and it is the genesis of what has happened with women's careers in universities. And I'd like to invite Lorna to the podium to tell us about her latest study and what she has learned. Thank you, Lorna.